director of Data Science Communities, which is a relatively new initiative at AstraZeneca. It's been going on for about 18 months, and I will be talking about how we at AstraZeneca are utilizing data science communities of practice to accelerate the development of medicine. So my background is maths and physics, and before AstraZeneca, I spent over 15 years working as a mathematical consultant in various industries. I had to apply maths and data science to solve business and policy problems. And I'm sure all of you are aware that any real world problem can't be solved by just maths. So I had to work in many interdisciplinary teams and work out how to apply maths that I know and developed for other applications in each specific case. So in a way, I became a member of maths community that spans mathematicians working in different industries and domains united by their passion for mathematics and its applications.
Thanks a lot so far. I hope just to slow down a little bit because we are 1 minute ahead of the program. I just wanted to make sure we can hear you. The screen is okay, and you started introducing, which is perfect. Give me still 30 seconds. Vera, thanks a lot for this smooth introduction. Just still 1 more minute. I see a lot of participants now joining as well from China. They are joining. Okay, so we are going to 78 participants. Now exactly it is 9:30 CET time, which should be 8:30 your time in UK, Vera, correct?
Yes, correct.
Perfect. So if you can start again this simple introduction for those who didn't hear. Thanks a lot.
Okay, sorry, I started too fast. So I'm Vera Hazelwood. I'm here from the R&D Data Science Learning and Development team at AstraZeneca, and I'm a director of the Data Science Communities, which have been going on for about 18 months, and we're building those communities. So I'll be sharing a case study of how we're using the data science communities to accelerate medicine development. I'm a physicist, a mathematician by training. I have been working in various industries before AstraZeneca for about 15 years as a mathematical consultant. I had to work with many subject matter experts, part of this interdisciplinary teams, to solve business and policy problems. So I was part of the community of mathematicians that was spanning different industries and domains, and we were all trying to transfer mathematical skills from one area to another. And I also want to mention that I'm a scholar with the organization called Community Roundtable, which is a worldwide community of community managers. So there is a community for community managers. And this organization works really hard to improve networking, innovation, and collaboration between community managers across different geographies and industries. And if you're interested in community development, this is definitely an organization that you must check out. So let's start with a very basic question. What is the community? So all of us are part of many different communities. Our families are small communities, our neighborhoods, our sport clubs, parenting groups at school, running groups, and many others. And people united around a particular interest who regularly interact. That's very important. They learn from each other and solve problems that all form a community. And among those communities, there's a special case of the communities of practice. So what it is and how is it different from a regular community? So the community of practice must have three key elements. And the first two, which is the domain, that's the area of focus of interest, and the community itself, which is the interaction between the community members, are the same for all communities. However, the communities of practice also have a point of action around which a community develops, shares, and maintains its knowledge. So while the domain denotes the topic of the community, the practice is actually a specific knowledge that the community develops. When they function well together, all these three elements make a community of practice a knowledge structure that is responsible for developing and sharing specific knowledge. So if we start talking specifically about data science at AstraZeneca, the domain would be a specific area of data science, for example, coding. The community would be events and activities organized by community members for interaction. An example of practice, a focus point of that particular community could be improving coding practices and propagating best practices for coding and testing your code, for example. So the coding overall is improved in organization. So let's talk a little bit more specific now about the data science at AstraZeneca. So AstraZeneca is a large organization. There's more than 10,000 people in R&D, and about 1,000 of them are data scientists. And just to give you a scale of the operation, so last year we had an internal data science symposium. So just for internal participants, we had over 800 people, 50 oral presentations, 8 parallel streams, and so on. And the data scientists in AstraZeneca are spread across the hub, the data science hub, but many, many different smaller teams, spoke teams, functions, and therapy areas. So here, just an illustration. Overall, we have about 40 different teams, 40 data science teams. And here, just a few of them, not a couple, half a dozen of them. So some of the data scientists who are sitting in these teams are doing actually similar work to each other, but they don't necessarily have an opportunity to find out about it. And in some teams, the data scientists are very specialized. For example, we could have an NLP scientist, natural language processing scientist, who's the only person in their team doing this work. So they might actually feel a little bit isolated and lonely and have a feeling that they're on their own. So this functional view of the organization could create dangers of maybe silos or low productivity or low innovation. So to overcome this, we can actually look at how the data science organizes an organization in a different way. So these the same people, but instead of looking at them just sitting purely in functional teams, we look at them as groups of practitioners united by a common topic. So you might be sitting in different teams, but you might be still doing medical imaging, or you're doing coding in R, for example, and so on. So obviously there are many possible topics of interest, and not each of these topics necessarily has to become a community of practice. So how do we work out around which of the topics we should form a community? So we used these criteria to prioritize among those topics. So we looked at the areas where there's opportunity for transferable skills and technology. So for example, in medical imaging, you could be analyzing different types of images or different modalities, but you might be using similar deep learning techniques to do that, to find the patterns. It should also be an area of intense development and strategic importance. So an area where a lot of new work and new results and cutting edge science is happening. And also this area needs to have an interest among the grassroots level, the data scientists, but also at the leadership level. So the leadership must single out this area as somewhere where the company wants to invest into the future. So we, looking at this criteria and topics, we came out with initially 4 communities of practice, and we now have more, but this were the initial 4 communities. So we had software development for AI, and that's everybody who's doing code and testing the code in AstraZeneca, specifically related to data science and AI applications. We have the imaging community of practice, which is related to medical imaging, analyzing medical imaging. We have the R community, so our language is really fast growing in pharma, and we have a lot of people coming in who are developing their skills and need to learn from each other. And then we have responsible AI community, which is focusing on ethics of application of AI in medicine, and that's a really important and well discussed topic at the moment. How do you ensure that your algorithm is no black box, that you can explain it to a regulator, for example, and your data doesn't contain bias that would unfairly treat certain groups of people, let's say. So that's an area of really intense development, and that's one of the reasons why we've chosen. So we run these communities as a cohort of the communities, so they all run in parallel and they all have similar ways we run it and similar components. And that's because we want the communities to learn from each other, interact with each other, and improve very quickly. So each of these communities has a steering group which represents many different scientists in different functions and different therapy areas. And each of these communities has a charter, and charter is very important. I mentioned before the practice of the community. So this charter specifies what the community is focusing on. So it's not just people who meet over coffee and discuss how they do medical imaging. There is a focus for them, and there's a different focus for different communities. We have the calendar of activities, so each community has a certain rhythm, so people become familiar, they recognize what's coming, they know that every last Thursday of the month there's a certain event coming up, and that ensures the momentum and liveliness. It's not ad hoc, and we plan this calendar about 6 to 9 months in advance. The next thing is about how we communicate with the members. AstraZeneca data scientists are based in over 30 different countries around the world. And with the pandemic, a lot of interactions was virtual, even in the same country. So we've invested heavily in the technology, that different types of technology that allows kind of new type interaction or close small group interaction, that people can still be virtual but interact with each other. And then each of the communities has important initiatives. I'll tell you a little bit more as I have an example. So something that everybody would recognize, or this is the community that runs this conference every year, let's say. We try to evaluate the communities. I'll say a little bit more about this. It's a very interesting and difficult topic, so we'll spend a couple of minutes on that. And then something that all communities were keen on is to be able to use the community to connect with an expert in a certain area or a mentor. So we run sort of a matching service where people can connect with a particular person with expertise that they need. So let's talk a little bit how we go about understanding the value the community brings. It's a bit of a soft subject. It's not a project that delivers certain monetary value that you can calculate immediately. So when we started the community, so rather than attempting to determine their value in advance, we created lots of events and activities that generated relationships and projects. So people themselves, via their interaction, could discover what value the communities can bring. And then we started tracking various things, number of people coming to the events, number of new projects and collaborations, where they come from, and so on, before we set up any targets for the future. So we it's kind of tracking versus targets, just measuring what you have before understanding. So establishing the baseline before understanding what you need to have in the future. We are connecting people, so we're connecting activities that people do as part of the community, which is kind of not part of necessarily of their official job description. So presenting at the community events, being members of the steering group, we're connecting them with the performance reviews and goals. And we're trying to collect this information. If you are talking to your manager and you say, I spend 10% of my time in the community, you need to be able to describe the value that you and the organization and your manager is getting out of it. So I think that is very powerful to do that. And then the last one is interesting because there are very few hard figures that you can attribute, hard value figures that you can attribute to communities. So it's this idea of systematic collection of anecdotal evidence, which sounds maybe a little bit controversial, but anecdotal evidence is these connections and this serendipity that occurs when people are put in the informal situation where they discuss their ideas and their projects, and then they suddenly realize that somebody's doing a similar thing and they strike a collaboration. But it's not enough just to hear about those projects now and again. There's a need to systematically go out to the community members with the surveys, with the structured interviews and so on, to make sure that we do capture the serendipity outcomes. So the last thing on the value is just a kind of stepping back again from those details, but we're looking at the three main areas. So that's the knowledge development. So knowledge developed in those communities align with business priorities, and that's the conversation with leadership that needs to be had regularly. The second one is, are all teams taking advantage of the community resources? And this is where we can actually have some numbers. So we can look at who came to the event or a number of events, and then they see which teams these people are from. Are we representing enough of the teams to call it as a cross-cutting community? And then how effectively is the knowledge developed? And that's those little projects and how knowledge flows between one team to another. That's about understanding those projects. So I have just this high-level slide just to summarize that we're tracking numbers and activities, and it's very important to reward people who take part in the communities. And we have various ways to do that, but we track everybody who's getting involved, and we reward them in some way. For example, we organize special event for them and so on. Part of the knowledge creation is that we create the best practice database. So there's the conversion of this maybe siloed or disjointed practices and conversion to proven standard. And then the specific projects that build the chain, that we had the community activity that led to insight and actually created real value. So that's a specific project. Before I finish, I just wanted to share a specific example. So there are many imaging scientists in AstraZeneca, and they're working across different teams. There's a danger of silos that I mentioned, and a number of people came together and formed the imaging community of practice with the aims of kind of sharing and exchanging knowledge, increasing awareness of external expertise, and promoting achievements across the organization. So these things were part of the charter. And the first thing that they did, they created a map of all imaging teams in AstraZeneca, and there was quite a big job. So you can see a little video here that just zooms in and out, mentioning, showing you all the different teams and people who are involved. And that actually had an immediate effect, that we could bring all these people together from different teams and get them to talk to each other and see whether they're doing anything that can be shared. And actually it led to a collaboration between two imaging teams in completely different parts of the organization, which led to a major simplification and a reduction in patient burden of a remote clinical trial where monitoring injection compliance was required. So just to wrap up.
We have one question as well, Vera, with 3 minutes time left. Thanks.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So I'm wrapping up. So what value are communities bringing? So they're helping companies to succeed in transformative economy. So where innovation is moving really fast, there's a global economy. It's allowing to keep companies to stay on the cutting edge. People inside the organization, they have lots of intangible assets, professional passion, relationship, and identity, and we utilizing it and converting it into tangible value.